So what is the Immanuel Approach? Let me start with a really short summary. First, we apply several simple yet powerful biblical truths and brain science principles to help the recipient establish an interactive, two-way, back-and-forth connection with the Lord. And then second, once this interactive, two-way, back-and-forth connection has been established, we can pursue any one of a variety of options with respect to endeavors that God and the recipient can engage in together. For example, the recipient can just enjoy spending time with God. Or the recipient can ask God a very simple follow-up question. Is there anything else you have for me today, or that you want me to know today? Or the recipient can receive comfort from the Lord by talking directly with Jesus about anything that is distressing her and then receiving attunement from Jesus. That is, perceiving and feeling the truth that He is with her in her distress, that He is hearing her and understanding her, and that He cares about her and is glad to be with her. Or the recipient can engage in intercessory prayer in the context of the Immanuel Approach interactive connection. That is, she can focus on Jesus and just talk to Him directly regarding her intercessory prayer concerns. Or the recipient can do spiritual direction. She can focus on Jesus and engage with Him directly as if He is a spiritual director. He's actually a very good spiritual director. Or the recipient can do emotional healing work. She can go to a traumatic memory and then work with the Lord to resolve the trauma. Or the recipient can pick an issue or question regarding which she would like some help and then look at and think about the issue or question with God. And sometimes God comes up with ideas we haven't thought of. Now let me circle back and provide a bit more detail regarding the first part of the Immanuel Approach. The part where we, quote, apply several simple yet powerful biblical truths and brain science principles to help the recipient establish an interactive, two-way, back-and-forth connection with the Lord, end quote. The foundational biblical truths are particularly simple. God is always with us. God always wants to connect with us, and the average person can establish a two-way interactive connection with God. The brain science principles for the initial steps in the Immanuel Approach process are also simple, but require just a bit more explanation. First, let me talk about relational circuits. God has created us to be relational beings, and to this purpose, God has created a big chunk of our brains to serve as the neurological hardware for running relationships. I call this part of our brains our relational circuits. And we can connect with each other and with God much more easily when these relational circuits are online and strongly active. A related and helpful bit of brain science is that recalling a positive memory and deliberately stirring up appreciation will predictably, consistently, reliably activate our relational circuits. That is, our brains are wired in such a way that feeling appreciation will bring our relational circuits online if they are off, and increase the intensity of their activity if they are already on. So, to be very practical, if we recall and think about a positive memory, and take the time to focus on and connect with the details, we will increasingly feel appreciation as we increasingly connect with the memory, and this will activate our relational circuits. Putting these pieces together, we can deliberately, predictably generate appreciation and activate our relational circuits by recalling and reconnecting with a positive memory. And this will prepare our brains to connect with God. Another piece of interesting, relevant, practical brain science is that our relationships are memory mapped. That is, our relationships with other people are carried in the memories for our past experiences with them. For example, I have thousands of memories of experiences with my wife, Charlotte, and our relationship is carried in these memories. If I deliberately recall, think about, and reconnect with these memories, this will activate the neurological circuits in my brain that carry my relationship with Charlotte, and thereby prepare my brain to connect with her in the present. In the same way, our relationships with God are memory mapped. Just as with other people, recalling, thinking about, and reconnecting with our memories for past positive experiences with God will activate the neurological circuits in our brains that carry our relationships with God, and thereby prepare our brains for connecting with God in the present. Therefore, if we have positive memories that include an experience of God's presence, then using these positive memories as the context for stirring up appreciation will be especially effective in preparing our brains for connecting with God. Note, memories that include a connection with God are ideal and optimal, but for those who do not yet have God-positive memories, other positive memories will still work. Yet another piece of interesting, relevant, practical brain science is that our brains are designed to work best in community. Actually, there are a number of ways in which our brains have been designed to work best in community, but the piece that is most relevant for the Immanuel Approach process is that our brains are more able to feel the importance and understand the meaning of our mental content when we describe it out loud to another person. These benefits will help us to perceive God's presence by helping us to feel the importance and recognize the meaning of subtle manifestations of His presence that we might otherwise miss. And these benefits will help us to connect with God by helping us to feel the importance and recognize the meaning of subtle interactive content coming from the Lord that we might otherwise miss. Therefore, putting all of these biblical truths and brain science principles together, if we coach recipients to re-enter the memory for a previous experience of connecting with God, coach them to deliberately stir up appreciation in the context of this positive memory, coach them to invite God to be with them and to help them establish a connection, and coach them to describe whatever comes into their awareness, most recipients will reliably, predictably, consistently perceive God's presence and be able to establish an interactive, two-way, back and forth connection with Him. And again, if you do not have memories for previous experiences of connecting with God, any positive memory will work for beginning the process. Another new and important feature of the Immanuel Approach is that it has safety nets. The initial steps of recalling a positive memory, deliberately stirring up appreciation, and establishing an interactive connection with the Lord all come together to set up an especially reliable home base that we can use as a backup or safety net troubleshooting resource. That is, if we encounter any difficulties that we are not able to handle with other troubleshooting resources, we can just coach the recipient to go back to the positive memory, appreciation, and interactive connection from the beginning of the session. And then in that safe, positive context, we can coach the recipient to engage directly with God and ask God for guidance and help regarding the problem. Again, we can help the recipient get back to his home base and then coach him to get help directly from the Lord in this safe, positive context at any point we encounter difficulties that we don't know how to handle. This especially reliable home base that gets set up at the beginning of each session also provides a make sure the recipient is okay safety net for the end of emotional healing sessions. If we are approaching the end of an emotional healing session and the recipient is still connected to negative emotions from a traumatic memory, either because the process has gotten stuck and we have not yet been able to resolve the blockage, or because there's just a lot of healing work to do and we simply don't have enough time, we can just coach the recipient to go back to the positive memory, appreciation, and connection with the Lord that were all refreshed and put in place at the beginning of the session. The recipient may be disappointed that he was not able to resolve the traumatic memories, but he will at least end up back at a safe place of relational connection and positive emotions. Immanuel Intervention Troubleshooting is discussed in much more detail in the Big Lion book and in segment number 4 of the basic training videos. But for the purposes of this introduction, here is a very, very short summary. First, the Lord is always with us. The Lord has been present with us in every past experience, and the Lord is present with us now. And second, the Lord always wants to establish an interactive connection with us. The Lord always wants us to be able to perceive His presence, connect with Him, synchronize with Him, interact with Him, receive from Him, and be with Him. Therefore, if the recipient is not initially able to establish an interactive connection, it just means that there are blockages in the way. Furthermore, these blockages can almost always be identified and resolved. So we work very persistently to expose and resolve any blockages, and in almost every situation, persistent troubleshooting eventually enables the recipient to perceive God and to experience a two-way interactive connection with His tangible, personal, living presence. When we do Immanuel Approach emotional healing work, we help the recipient establish the interactive connection with God that serves as the foundation for the session, and then we coach the recipient to engage directly with God as the primary therapist. When the recipient is able to establish and maintain a strong connection with the Lord, as you will see in the demonstrations for training segments 10 and 11, then God does all of the heavy lifting, and the whole process can be amazingly simple. May you be blessed to use these principles and tools to experience the wonderful, wise, tangible, living, loving, life-giving, interactive friendship presence of God.